Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. P, Dr. Wayne Purnell, the Breakthrough Success Coach and your Powerful Presence Mentor. Today, I'm super excited. I've been looking forward to this interview for a really long time. The Get It Done guy, you may know him that way. Robbins won't tell you this, but he's the Get It Done guy from the Quick and Dirty Podcast Network. He's been doing a bunch of things on just blogs and podcasts. He's a graduate of MIT and Harvard Business School, which is quite a combination. He's passionate about helping people have and live into extraordinary lives. We're going to talk much more about his shift from engineering and fixing things and helping people in that way to really helping in the personal development space. And extraordinary lives is a big thing. We're gonna dive deep into that. He's been on the initial team. I'm reading his bio, and it's incredible. Stever has been on the initial team of 9 startups, hosted a top 10 iTunes business podcast for 12 years. He's authored 3 books. He's got a 4th one on the way. He's co-written a musical. He's certified master trainer elite of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, trained as a hypnotist and a swing dancer. I'm going to find out whether that's West or East. Managed the creation of the Quicken Visa card, the world's first downloadable financial statement, and just had to read it that way, and helped redesign the Harvard MBA program. So this slacker, I don't know why I wanted to bring him up. No, it's awesome. Stever has been to Burning Man 4 times. He's now seriously considering learning how to weld because, how else do you build a 50-foot sculpture? So, here you go. Welcome, Stever. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a delight. You and I were talking before we recorded, and there's so much going on in your world. You've done quite a bit. You are, only 12 years old, and you've accomplished all of this. It's incredible.
It's true. They're very long years, but there's only 12 of them.
So people don't accidentally become engineers and, choose to go to MIT. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident. You also ended up at Harvard Business School. Or was it? Like, you're laughing? So,
believe it or not, both of them were accidents.
I accidentally went to MIT is one of the best things. That's awesome.
All right. You want the story?
I do. Yeah, I do.
I'm daring you to ask for it.
I want the story. Stever, tell me.
I know we're recording this on video. Are people going to actually see this?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, everybody.
So here's how it works. I have a broad podcast, like people will listen to it. So if you say something that's visual, or if you show me something, then you have to describe it, because there are people that listen. And this is loaded to our YouTube channel as well. So yeah, you get to say hi, everybody. Exactly.
All right. So this is going to be a pretty self-revelatory conversation, because unfortunately I have no boundaries. So, as I was about to say,
well, you've come to the right place. That's awesome. That's great.
In order to understand the MIT and the Harvard Business School stories, it is essential to know that I grew up in a traveling New Age commune. And what I like to tell people, which is not a joke, is that I learned that it was not acceptable to wear a loincloth in public school from experience. I had to be told by the teacher to go home and put clothes on. It was a pretty non-traditional upbringing. And as you can imagine, there's this trope of, there are those kids on the other side of the tracks who you're not allowed to play with. Guess what? That was me and my sister. Kids were not allowed to play with us because we were too weird. I remember at one point we were living in Telluride, Colorado. First time I've ever told this story to anyone in public. We were living in Telluride, Colorado, and my father decided that it was a one building school. It had 12 rooms, one for each grade. My father decided he wanted to come in and teach like psychic growth, helping the kids develop their psychic powers or something like that. And as you can imagine, somehow he convinced them to do it. I don't know how he pitched it to them.
It was
But
a
from
Jedi
that day,
mind trick.
yeah, and from that day forward, I didn't have any friends. So that was the yeah, that was that. Um, but I grew up in a traveling New Age commune, and I discovered, and I'm not going to say what year this was, because as we were also discussing beforehand, both of us revel in fighting tooth and nail against aging. But I was one of the first human beings on the planet who experienced my adolescence on the internet. And I had made all of these friends, and we're talking me as a teenager now. This was when I was about 14, 15. I had made all these friends over the internet who I'd never met in person, and they all went to this school called MIT, which it was many years before I discovered it was pronounced MIT. And all I knew is these were these kids who I had met over the internet, and they were my friends, and I wanted to go to school with them. And that was 100% of my thought process in deciding to apply to MIT. I was only vaguely aware that it was a good school. I interviewed, I got in, I went. That was how I got to MIT. With respect to Harvard Business School, the story is similarly deep and carefully considered. I was at my first job out of MIT. I was working for a company that had the best product in our industry. I mean, really the best product in our industry. It was fabulous. And we were going out of business. The first round of layoffs happened 2 weeks after I got there. And so I went to my manager at my 1-year review and I said, Nancy, I don't understand. How is it that we have the best product on the market and we're going out of business? And she looked at me and said wisely, to understand that, you need to understand marketing or strategy. And I said, what do those words even mean? I'm an engineer, I understand bits and bytes and things like that. What the heck is a marketing? And she said, yeah, you're going to need to go get an MBA to understand this. And I was like, okay, I have no intention of ever going back to school. I just happened to live, having graduated from MIT, I just happened to live halfway between MIT and Harvard. For those people who are familiar with the geography of Boston and Cambridge, the two schools are only about 2 miles apart. And I lived right in the middle. So I was a 20-minute walk from either one. And I was like, well, I don't really want to go back to school that badly, but there's a business school that's just a 20-minute walk away. So I wandered over to Harvard, went into the admissions office and said, I'd like to sit in on the class and see what this whole business school thing is like. And unlike MIT, Harvard Business School classes are highly interactive. They're all case discussion. And I watched this thing go on for an hour and I was like, oh my God, this looks like the funnest thing ever. And I can also get an MBA while doing this. I'm going to apply. So I applied. And I told my manager that I was thinking of applying, and she said, you have to apply because if you get in, you can always say no. She's like, just preserve your optionality. She didn't say optionality. That's my grown-up word that I'm using. And so I applied and got in. And I still remember very vividly standing in my living room, holding the acceptance letter from Harvard Business School. Although actually they had told me verbally 2 weeks previously that I had gotten in. That's a whole nother story in and of itself. And I was looking at this letter that said, congratulations, you've been admitted to Harvard Business School. And I called my boss and I said, you were wrong. I said, I grew up in a freaking trailer with a bunch of hippies, and I'm holding an acceptance letter to Harvard Business School. There is no way that I can say no to this. And
Amazing.
that was how I ended up going to Harvard Business School. But in neither case, interestingly enough, was the prestige of the institution at all a factor in my decision, which of course is ironic because the prestige of the two institutions has absolutely and utterly shaped my life since I graduated from them.
Amazing. That's amazing. So, you went on to develop certain both products as well as online products, things that people could download, and there are a lot of things that we're using every day, perhaps that have your fingerprints on them. Yes.
That's because I don't always lick my fingers clean after I get into the cup.
There you go. I mean, look, you've done what I am calling this back up. You did something with Quicken, which I mean, everybody has touched that at one point or other. if nothing more than to go, I'm going to do it a different way. But there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people using this thing. So
So
what? Yeah, that. So that and how did you get into doing the get it done guy thing? Can you talk about
oh
both
my
of those?
Yeah, those are two big questions. Okay, so the Quicken thing, let's be clear. When I was at Intuit, oh, sorry. For those of you watching, very important life lesson. If you are within 1,000 miles of a miracle, take credit for it, right? And one of the things that you'll find in the business world is that everyone takes credit for the success of their organization, right? I work at Google. Well, who the frick cares that you work at Google? You didn't make Google what it is. Even Larry and Sergey or whatever their names are didn't make Google what it was. They were unbelievably, extraordinarily lucky in timing, and they did a fabulous, fabulous job of taking advantage of that. Don't get me wrong at all about that part. But there's this whole myth that people can predict the future. And now, having been with 9 startups, I will tell you I don't know of any significant difference between the ones that succeeded and the ones that failed, except for things that could not have possibly been predicted in advance. Because the thing that no one realizes is when a company is started, everyone thinks it's going to succeed. Otherwise, they wouldn't be betting on working there, or they wouldn't be betting on funding it. So, so to say, oh, look, this person was this genius because they started the right company at the right time. Well, there were 500 other people who also started that same company at that same time. But the one who succeeded just happened to sit next to Warren Buffett on a plane ride or Bill Gates on a plane ride, and they got the contract that someone else didn't get. But I don't want to denigrate anyone's hard work. I guess what my point is that all the people work, all the people do their best, all the people make good decisions. And my personal position is that luck is about 80% of the ultimate outcome. And you can increase luck, and it is absolutely a matter of skill to both increase luck and then to take advantage of luck when it happens. And then, of course, the PR story is that it was not luck, and that you didn't take advantage of random circumstance, but you had the whole thing planned out and you were a visionary, et cetera, from the future. So this is a long way of saying I joined into it when there were just 100 people there because I could see that it was going to grow up and to become the financial world spanning behemoth. And the project that I ended up working on as my first management project out of business school was the Quicken Visa card. And all of us, remember, this was in a day when there were literally no downloadable statements. No one had ever even conceived of that idea. And this was the idea that the group was formed to pursue. And I assure you, we sat there and said, someday all statements in finance will all be downloadable in formats that haven't even been invented yet. Maybe a format called a transportable document file or something. I mean, I don't know, whatever it's, but and we saw the future and we said, we're going to capture that future. No, that was all bullshit. It was a random idea. We said, let's try it and see if we can get it to work. And it turns out it was the first downloadable statement. And now all the statements are downloadable. So the secret to everyone watching is, yes, I'm going to lean in hard on that credential. However, let's be clear. So many credentials are they're BS. Okay. Sorry. I don't know if I should be saying all of this.
I love it. I think that's great, because
no boundaries.
It may be the first time that I've heard an engineer say that, most of the path that was laid out was luck. It's like, that's awesome.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull out another one of my credentials. A bunch of friends of mine and I, when we were in undergrad, this was my senior year at MIT, we were sitting around a table discussing where we were going to work after we graduated. And we literally were saying we don't want to wear suits to work, because this was back when engineers still mostly wore suits to work. We said, we don't want to wear suits to work, so let's found our own company where we can dress casually. And this was at Royal East Restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we were sitting around, big brunch table. There were about 15 of us. And we said, well, but what product are we going to sell? And we went around the table and each person gave their ideas. And we got to one friend of mine and he said, well, I've been working on this research project called TCP/IP, which is this protocol that underlies this thing called the internet. And because it's public domain and publicly funded, we can just take the source code and build on top of that. This was before the phrase open source really existed. And we said, oh, okay, let's do that. $360 million later, FTP Software, was finally acquired by Novell or whoever acquired us, etc. But and again, that's the real story. The story that the people who then went to work for FTP and staked their careers and professional reputations, they talk about what strategic geniuses we were and we foresaw the rise of the internet. No, we just didn't want to wear suits, and that's literally why we did it. Right, and so
look, this is huge, because a lot of the work I do has to do with you get to determine who you're becoming based on your values and what values you want to live into. And, the values of, I don't want to be stuffy. I don't want to be forced to wear a suit and conform to some, kind of random code or whatever, allowed you to step into the place of, we're going to just start our own place. And, this seems like a good place to start. That's awesome.
So let's bring that back in a few minutes, because I lost touch with that going to Harvard Business School, and it has been decades, and I am still struggling to regain it. But we can. That's a whole nother deep psychological delve. Aren't you guys looking and listening? Aren't you lucky that I have no boundaries? You're hearing stuff that no one else is going to tell you
this
about
is
yourself.
Awesome.
So FTP Software, if you used the internet between about 1986 and 1995, and if you were using it on an MS-DOS or a Windows 3.1 machine, I believe, or Windows 95, there was actually probably about a 60% chance you're using software that I wrote part of to access the internet. So, for better or worse, not only can I claim to have been involved in the first downloadable statement ever created, but I can claim to be involved with one of the people who enabled personal computers to connect to the internet at all. All I can say is that after spending time on Twitter, I'm not convinced it was a good thing that we did that, but we did do it.
Well, it was inevitable, right? It was going to happen whether you did it or someone else did it, and I'm glad you did it, because your perspective is refreshing, actually. So that's awesome. That's awesome. I truly appreciate the irreverence. It's like, well, we did a thing.
I'm an engineer at heart. I mean, that's how I think. And I'm not only an engineer, I'm an engineer who wasn't socialized in mainstream culture. I didn't grow up, right? The kids wouldn't play with me because I was too weird. So a lot of the things we're taught to do in terms of how we delude ourselves about the way the world works, right? I didn't get that. Those aren't part of my programming. So when I hear people say things like, "Oh, work hard and you'll be successful," I look at this and I go, "Really? Are you serious? Like, do you actually understand how work works? Do you think that Elon Musk has done 300,000 times as much work as I have to have the net worth? Actually, he has a net worth of more than 300,000 times my net worth. Like that's just ridiculous. Like, how could you think that hard work generates success? My cleaning lady works harder than I've ever worked in my entire life, and I know how much she makes an hour, and I can do the math, and I know what her cost of living is because she lives in my same metropolitan area, and I know what average rents are. There's mathematically no way that this woman is going to become a millionaire unless she does something else on the side, like invest in real estate or whatever. But I just look at that, and as an engineer, I say, last time I checked, the entire reason we invented the Industrial Revolution was so we wouldn't have to work hard and we could still get ahead. Like, literally, that is the foundation for our current economy, is the idea that it doesn't take hard work to get ahead.
This is fabulous. Seriously, this is fabulous, right? Just blowing the concept. One of the things that I appreciate about you is the idea of an exponential trajectory. And it's based on leverage, right? It's based on time leverage. It's based on money leverage. It's based on any of the resources we have, right? And so as you develop, and I know there's more to your story, so I'll let you get back to it. I just wanted to interject and plug the idea of where you're headed with this, which is the whole extraordinary lives concept has to tie to the idea of it's not hard. It's not necessarily easy, but it's also simple, right? That it takes work. You have to invest, time and other resources to learn it. But once you've got it,
Well, time and resources, and also effort. I don't say that just because I don't believe that if you work hard, that hard work and getting ahead are not correlated. And I think laziness is correlated with not getting ahead, because if you're lazy, you'll tend to let opportunity pass you by. You won't jump on it. You won't contribute when luck hands you an opportunity. You won't actually jump on it and do the opportunity thing. You won't necessarily have taken the time to develop the skills to have something to offer to the opportunity. So being lazy can really reduce your luck and reduce your chances to get ahead. But just working hard is not, in fact, I don't believe, correlated with success. Um,
awesome.
does that make sense?
Total.
It's like
Totally. Do you know, I've referred to this before. There's a small booklet called U Squared by Price Pritchett. And in it, he talks about it opens with him telling a true story. He's sitting in a mountain cabin. He's watching a fly buzz against the pane of the glass window trying to get out. And his story is, unfortunately, the fly will die there because its only path is to try harder. And had it backed up and been able to gather the perspective it needed, it would have seen the open doorway just 10 paces away that would have allowed its escape. But instead, it pushes against the window pane and will die trying harder. And that's really, in a big way, what you're saying is, if you keep working really hard without having the perspective of there are other pathways, there are so many other pathways available for you to get ahead, you'll miss all that.
And also, what do you mean by getting ahead? Right? There's the getting ahead, which is making more money. There's the getting ahead, which is having a happier life. There's the getting ahead, which is having deep and fulfilling relationships. And again, I'm a freaking engineer. So once upon a time, part of the way that I learned NLP, by the way, the neuro-linguistic programming, which is this pseudoscience, which has been thoroughly debunked by modern science, despite the fact that the last 30 years of neurological research supports huge amounts of the NLP model. But I'm very glad that it's considered a pseudoscience. So for those of you who are familiar with it, it is a great pseudoscience, because what that means is I don't need to be licensed to practice it. So when I work with coaching clients and they're like, oh, I have these limitations that get in my way. And I'm like, close your eyes for a minute. Let's do a thought experiment. And then for some reason, those limitations go away. I'm just kind of like, yes, I'm so glad I didn't have to get licensed for this. But the reason that I got interested in NLP is I got to MIT and discovered that there were people who I wanted to be friends with. I can't believe I'm telling you all this. I've never told all these stories in one place at one time before. And some of them I don't think I've ever
It happens seriously, it happens here. It happens on One Sharp Sword. Welcome.
That's because I'm looking at the posters over your shoulder, and I'm going, wow, significance, factor, dynamic, power. I just have to say anything. So I get to MIT, and
that's my NLP. That's the subtle suggestion, right? It's like, right there you go.
There's also, every few minutes my screen flickers and it says say everything on it. I don't know where that's coming from. I'm assuming that's a Zoom thing that you have set up. And all right, so I get to MIT and I'm this little geek who has never really had friends in my life because I was this weird hippie commune guy. And there are people I want to make friends with, and I notice I can't make friends with them. So being a little geek, my thinking is, if I cannot make friends with people, I must go learn how to make friends with people. Here I am at MIT, the font of all knowledge in the world. Where can I make friends with people? Where can I learn how to make friends with people? The psychology department. So I literally went and took like every psychology class, including things like psychopharmacology, at MIT, solely 100% for the purpose of learning how to make friends. And I took an overview course that taught us like six different models of how human interaction works, and I forgot what they were called, like element relationship theory, and the humanistic psychology, the Carl Rogers, and cognitive behavior therapy, all these things. And I again, I'm an engineer. I care about results. So I would go to class and I would walk out and I would see one of the people that I wanted to be friends with, And I would be like, how can I apply today's lesson to make friends? And the answer was none of it worked. And then I read this book about NLP, and it talked about certain things having to do with language and how that helps people establish rapport. And I was like, well, can't hurt to try it. And I went out to one of those people who I had never been able to talk to before, and I used the technique in the book, and it worked. Boom, we became friends. And I was like, isn't that interesting? And of course, there were two learnings there. One learning is, although I am a big, big, big believer in research, and I believe that things that have been researched have a much higher likelihood of being true and accurate than things that have not been, research is not perfect. And sometimes research, for one reason or another, doesn't actually get at the truth. And number two, that there are models of human cognition and psychology and linguistics, other than the ones that are currently accepted by the academic world, that seem to work better than what the academic world knows. So those became a foundation for a lot of future things in my life, was those ways of thinking.
Love that. And that's another place we're congruent. I went through clinical psychology, right? My doctorate's in clinical psych. And along the way, it was like, there was so much, everything is anchored to the past, and we must begin with your mother and your father. And for me, it was about positive psychology. It wasn't even called that when I started leaning toward, look, something allowed you to survive and get to this place. There are strengths you carry with you. Let's find out what those strengths are and let's leverage those, right? And that's a lot of the work I do. And NLP along the way, it's helpful. Like knowing the principles of it, it's helpful. A lot of people misuse it. A lot of people wave it like a bat, like beating people with this technique, and
which I do not, by the way. I'm not a big slam people over the head with it kind of thing. I use it in coaching in a very targeted way. So, someone has trouble doing public speaking, great. We can knock that out of the way. And then, and keep in mind, knocking someone out of the fear of public speaking is a separate stage of the process from then teaching them how to do it well. And this is something that I think a lot of the self-help world misses, is they concentrate on removing roadblocks. Super, super important, right? I'm afraid of water. So when we all go to the beach, I'm afraid to go in the water and play with my cousins, right? Great, we can knock out that fear. And by the way, there's a lot of ways other than NLP to do it too. There's, but we can knock the fear of water out. That doesn't magically teach me how to swim. So just because I'm now not afraid of going in the water doesn't mean that I know how to go in the water safely. Nor does it mean, by the way, that I want to go in the water. It just means I'm not scared of the water anymore. And so the motivation towards something is different from an emotional motivation towards something is different from an emotional block that is pushing you away from something. And both of those are different from actually having the skill to do the thing. And in our society, I think, especially in the self-help world, we conflate all three of those. And
very much so. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah. Love that.